There is a strange kind of frustration that comes with dust. You can clean a room, step away for what feels like no time at all, and then catch the light coming through a window and see it again. It is floating in the air, sitting on the shelf, lining the edge of the lamp, settling into corners you thought were already handled. Modern homes have bigger closets, more products, stronger vacuums, and entire aisles of sprays and wipes. Yet many people feel like they are always losing this fight. In the 1950s, women did not have all of that. What they had instead was a set of small habits that kept dust from taking over in the first place. That does not mean life was easy, and it does not mean every home was perfect. But many women understood something simple. If dust was dealt with early, it rarely became a full-day problem. If old household wisdom like this still matters to you, subscribe and stay close. There is a lot more hidden in these ordinary routines than most people realize. Number 1, the daily dust walk. One of the most useful habits was also one of the quietest. Many women made a short pass through the main rooms each day, not with a full bucket of supplies, but with their eyes open. This was not deep cleaning. It was a quick check of the places where dust showed up first. A windowsill, a coffee table, the top of the radio, the edge of a dresser. The idea was to notice the room before the room got ahead of you. That daily walk mattered because dust builds in layers. If you catch the first layer, a soft cloth can handle it in seconds. If you wait a week or two, that same room starts to feel dull. The furniture loses its shine. The air feels stale. Corners start looking neglected. In many 1950s homes, the woman of the house did not wait for a dramatic mess to announce itself. She saw the beginning of it and cut it off early. This was one reason smaller houses often felt more cared for. Women were moving through the rooms constantly and seeing them in ordinary light, not just when company was expected. Today, many people clean only when things look bad enough to justify the effort. Back then, the effort was often smaller because it happened sooner. That little walk through the house set the tone for everything that followed. Number 2, opening windows with purpose. People often imagine older homes with windows thrown open all day, fresh air blowing through every room, everything feeling crisp and clean. There is some truth in that, but it was usually more controlled than that picture suggests. Women knew that air could freshen a room, but they also knew that open windows could bring in pollen, street dust, soot, and dirt, depending on the season and the neighborhood. So windows were often opened at the right time, not just left open without thought. A room might be aired out in the morning, then closed before wind, traffic, or afternoon grime had a chance to settle inside. Curtains might be adjusted. Sills might be wiped after. This was not casual. It was practical. That small bit of judgment made a difference. A house can feel stuffy when it is sealed too tightly. But it can also get dirty fast when outside dust is invited in for hours. Many 1950s women treated fresh air like part of housekeeping, not separate from it. They were balancing comfort with control. Modern life often treats cleaning and ventilation as two different things. Older routines did not always separate them that way. Airing out a room meant paying attention to what else might be coming in with that breeze, and that same attention showed up in the next habit too. Number 3, beating rugs outside. Before wall-to-wall carpeting took over so many homes, area rugs played a bigger part in daily life, and they were handled more directly. A rug did not just stay on the floor until a machine passed over it. It could be lifted, carried outside, hung over a line or railing, and beaten until the trapped dust came flying out. It was physical work, but it removed dirt from the house instead of moving it around inside. That is an important difference. Dust trapped in fabric does not disappear just because it is no longer visible from above. Women knew rugs held crumbs, dirt from shoes, lint, and all the fine dry particles that settle over time. Taking that rug outside was a way of getting rid of the problem at its source. Do you remember anyone in your family taking rugs outside instead of just vacuuming over them? This habit also says something larger about the way cleaning used to work. It was more direct. Less sealed up, less dependent on products promising to solve everything. Sometimes the answer was simply to take the dusty thing outdoors and hit it until the dust was gone. That same plain logic showed up right near the front door. Number 4. Wiping the entryway first. Many women understood that the cleanest room in the house could be ruined by the dirtiest few feet. The entryway was where outside became inside. Shoes tracked in dirt, door frames caught dust, mats held what the rest of the floor did not need. If that area was ignored, the whole house paid for it. That is why the front entrance often got more attention than people might expect. Mats were shaken out, thresholds were wiped, doors and handles were cleaned. In some homes, there were quiet rules about where shoes belonged and where they did not. The point was not formality for its own sake, it was prevention. This is one of the old habits that feels especially relevant now. Many people try to clean the entire house while skipping the spot that keeps feeding it more dust and dirt every day. A 1950s woman was often thinking in the opposite direction. Stop the mess where it enters, and every other room becomes easier to manage. Once that line at the door was respected, the next rule became even more important, because dust spreads fastest in rooms that give it too many places to hide. Number 5. Keeping floors clear. A clear floor is easier to sweep, easier to vacuum, and much harder for dust to overwhelm. That sounds obvious, but older homes were often better at this than modern ones for a reason. They usually had less on the floor to begin with. Fewer baskets left out, fewer piles, fewer loose objects tucked under chairs and side tables. That meant daily cleaning could happen without first turning into a long process of picking things up. Women in the 1950s did not always have large houses, but many had strong rules about what belonged where. If something had no place, it became part of the mess. And once the floor started collecting objects, dust had cover. It settled around chair legs, under stacks, beside footstools, and behind anything that delayed a broom or vacuum. This was not about having a perfect home for show. It was about making the room easy to reset. When the floor stayed open, the whole room stayed lighter. Cleaning took minutes instead of an entire afternoon. And once the floor and entry were kept under control, attention naturally moved upward, toward the furniture, fabrics, and surfaces where dust liked to settle quietly and wait. Once the floor was under control, the next layer of dust was easier to see. It sat on furniture, settled into cloth, dulled wooden surfaces, and gathered around the objects people touched every day without always noticing. This was where many 1950s women showed the difference between cleaning a room once in a while and keeping a room in shape all the time. Dust was not treated like a surprise. It was expected, which meant the house was arranged to make dealing with it simpler. Number 6. Using dust cloths instead of paper towels. A dust cloth was a normal part of housekeeping in many homes. It might be an old flour sack, a soft piece of worn cotton, a rag cut from a retired shirt, or a cloth kept for one specific purpose only. Women often had certain cloths for furniture, certain ones for windows, and rougher ones for dirtier jobs. That may sound small, but it mattered. A soft, reusable cloth picked up dust better than a flimsy disposable wipe, and it did not leave behind bits of lint every time it passed over a surface. This also reflects the larger cleaning mindset of the time. Housekeeping was not built around constantly buying new things to throw away after one use. It was built around keeping a small set of useful tools ready and knowing exactly what each one was for. A woman could reach for the same folded cloth each morning, give the dresser or end table a quick wipe, shake the cloth outside and keep moving. That made the task feel ordinary instead of dramatic. Today, many people clean in bursts, often with whatever is nearby. Older routines were more settled than that. The right cloth was already there, already known, already part of the rhythm. Once that habit was in place, furniture could be maintained before it ever looked neglected. Number 7. Polishing wood on a schedule. Wood furniture used to play a much bigger role in everyday homes. Dressers, dining tables, buffets, coffee tables, sideboards, headboards, and cabinets were not occasional accent pieces. They were part of daily life and they showed dust quickly. A dull tabletop or dusty chair arm could make the whole room feel tired. That is why many women did not wait until furniture looked bad to care for it. They wiped and polished it on a loose schedule. The point was not making everything glossy for show. The point was keeping the surface from drying out, collecting grime, and losing that cared-for look that gave a room warmth. Dust sticks differently when a surface has been ignored for too long. It mixes with kitchen residue, fingerprints, smoke, or ordinary household air and becomes harder to remove. But when furniture was lightly maintained, it stayed easier to clean. This was one of the quiet reasons older rooms often looked calmer. The furniture was not fighting years of buildup. It was being touched regularly. Even one polished table could change how a room felt because it reflected care instead of neglect. Modern people often think of polishing as something extra, almost decorative. In many 1950s homes, it was closer to maintenance, and maintenance prevented larger work later. The same thinking applied to fabric too, because dust did not only settle on hard surfaces, it loved anything soft enough to hold it. Number 8. Shaking curtains and slipcovers. Curtains, slipcovers, and other cloth surfaces were not just background decoration. They were active parts of the room, and they collected dust quietly day after day. In homes with open windows, coal or oil heat in some areas, nearby roads, pets, children, or regular family traffic, fabric could hold far more than people realized. Women understood this, so they did not always leave those items untouched for months at a time. A curtain might be taken down and shaken. A slipcover might be removed, brushed, or washed. Even a quick adjustment could send out a small cloud that made it obvious how much dust fabric was holding. This was one reason older homes often felt fresher without needing strong artificial scents. Dust was being removed from the materials that trapped it most easily. It also helped that many homes used washable slipcovers and practical curtains, rather than treating every upholstered surface as too delicate to disturb. There was a directness to it. If cloth held dust, then cloth had to be handled. That may seem obvious, yet many modern rooms are filled with fabric that rarely gets cleaned beyond a quick vacuum pass. When did fabric in the home start being treated more like decoration than part of cleaning? That question leads naturally to the furniture underneath, because curtains were only one half of the soft surface problem. Number 9. Turning cushions and brushing upholstery. Chairs and sofas were not ignored until they looked worn out. In many homes, cushions were turned, fluffed, and brushed as part of ordinary upkeep. This helped with appearance, of course, but it also helped with dust, lint, crumbs, and the dry particles that settled into upholstery long before stains ever showed up. A brushed chair looks different from a neglected one. The fabric sits better. The dust does not sink as deeply. The room feels less tired. Women did not always need special machines for this. A clothes brush, a firm hand, and a few minutes of attention could keep upholstered furniture from becoming a hidden storage place for months of dust. This is another place where routine beat intensity. A sofa that gets a little care every week never reaches the same state as one that gets ignored for half a year and then attacked all at once. Older women often understood that softness in a room still needed discipline. Fabrics were pleasant, but they were not passive. They caught everything. That same rule became even easier to follow when the surfaces around those chairs and sofas were not crowded with too many things to clean around. Number 10. Keeping tabletops almost bare. One of the clearest differences between many older homes and many modern ones was the number of objects sitting out at all times. This does not mean 1950s women owned nothing. It means there was often a stronger sense that a tabletop had a job to do. A dining table was for meals. A side table held a lamp, perhaps an ashtray, maybe one framed photo. A dresser might hold a brush, a powder box, a tray, or a clock, but not 20 unrelated objects with no clear home. That mattered because dust loves decoration. It settles on every figurine, every stack, every little object that must be lifted, wiped under, and put back. The more things covering a surface, the less likely that surface is to be cleaned quickly and often. A nearly bare tabletop could be wiped in seconds. A crowded one became a chore people put off. Which would be harder today, owning fewer decorations or cleaning around all of them? This was not only about taste, it was about making the room manageable. Many women kept out what they used or truly valued and let the surface stay open enough to clean without hesitation. That one choice made daily upkeep easier than many people realize. But even a clean tabletop only showed the visible dust. The dust that made a house feel old and stale was often gathering lower down, higher up, and deep in the corners people stopped seeing. The dust people notice first is usually the dust sitting out in the open. It is the layer on the table, the mark on the shelf, the film on the radio, or the television screen. But many 1950s women knew that the kind of dust that made a house feel tired often gathered in places no one looked at every day. Those hidden areas did not always shout for attention, yet they quietly changed how a room smelled, how the air felt, and how clean the whole house seemed. That is why so many women treated these overlooked spots as part of ordinary housekeeping, instead of waiting until spring cleaning or holiday company forced the issue. Number 11. Cleaning baseboards before they looked dirty. Baseboards are one of those details that people stop seeing until they are truly filthy. Then suddenly they seem to be everywhere. In many older homes, women tried not to let that happen. Baseboards were wiped often enough that they stayed part of the room instead of becoming a separate problem. This mattered more in the 1950s than many people realize. Homes were full of movement. Children ran through rooms, windows were opened, furnaces and radiators moved air, and dust settled low along the edges where walls met the floor. A dusty baseboard gave a room a neglected look, even when the middle of the floor had been swept. Women who stayed ahead of this did not always make it a major event. Sometimes it was done during a regular room cleaning with a rag in hand, especially in bedrooms, hallways, and living rooms. It was one of those habits that took little time when done often, and far too much time when ignored too long. This is a good example of how old housekeeping was often built, around keeping small details from turning into visible decline. A clean baseboard does not draw praise. Most people do not walk into a room and admire it, but they feel the effect of it. The room feels sharper, fresher, and more finished. And once women were already working low around a room, the next places that needed care were often the ones lifting the light overhead. Number 12. Dusting lampshades and light fixtures. Dust changes light. It softens it in the wrong way. It makes a room feel dim, tired, and a little stale, even when no one can explain why. In the 1950s, lamps mattered a great deal. Many homes relied on table lamps, floor lamps, bedside lamps, and modest ceiling fixtures to create warmth in the evening. If those shades and fixtures gathered dust, the room felt older than it needed to. That is why lampshades were often brushed or wiped, and light fixtures were not ignored forever. A woman might take a clean cloth to the base of a lamp, dust around the bulb area carefully, and remove the film that slowly settled on the shade itself. It was one of those tasks that made a bigger difference than its size would suggest. Dust on a lampshade also had a way of spreading. Every touch sent some of it into the air or down onto nearby furniture. So this was not just about appearance. It was part of keeping the room from feeding its own dust problem over and over. Modern rooms often have more electronics and fewer fabric shades than older ones, but the principle still feels familiar. When the things that shape the room's light are dusty, the whole space feels dull. Older women understood that a brighter room often started with simple cleaning, not stronger bulbs. And once attention moved near the windows and light, another dust trap was hard to miss. Number 13. Wiping windowsills and tracks. Windows bring in light, but they also collect the proof of everything floating through the air. Dust settles on the sill, gathers in the corners, and packs itself into tracks, frames, and edges that people rarely touch, unless they are opening or closing the window. In many 1950s homes, that area was not forgotten for long. Women knew the window was one of the first places where dust showed itself clearly. Sunlight made it visible. A white painted sill with a gray film on it could make a room look tired in an instant. So a quick wipe of the sill often became a normal part of cleaning the room. It was practical, fast, and deeply connected to the larger idea of prevention. This habit worked especially well because windows connected so many other parts of the house. They affected air, curtains, light, smell, and the general sense of freshness. If the sill was dirty, the room never fully felt clean, no matter how neat the furniture looked. Do you remember older homes where the windows always seemed freshly wiped, even if the house itself was simple? That kind of care often extended into the bedroom too, where dust mixed with fabric in ways people did not always think about carefully enough. Number 14. Making beds in a way that controlled dust. Making the bed was not only about appearance. In many homes, it was also part of controlling the dust that built up around fabric, blankets, sheets, and pillows. A bed that was straightened, aired, and reset each morning did more than make the room look orderly. It helped keep the bedding from becoming a tangled place where lint, hair, and ordinary household dust stayed trapped and spread through the room. Many women opened the bed, smoothed the sheets, adjusted the blankets, fluffed the pillows, and let the whole thing settle into place with intention. This was not always done in a hurry. It was part of how the day began. Older houses also tended to have simpler bedrooms. There were fewer throw pillows, fewer decorative layers, fewer extra fabrics lying around doing nothing but collecting dust. That made the task more direct and easier to repeat daily. A made bed also changed behavior. When the bed looked fresh, the whole room felt cared for. Clothes were less likely to be thrown around. The bedroom held its shape better through the rest of the day. And once the bedding was back in order, women often connected that work to another weekly rhythm that mattered just as much. Number 15. Weekly bedroom dusting before laundry day. Bedrooms and laundry were closely tied together in ways that make perfect sense once you think about them. Sheets, blankets, pillowcases, clothing, socks, towels, and curtains all release fibers. They hold skin flakes, lint, and dust that settle into corners, onto dressers, under beds, and along the floor. Many women understood that these things belonged to the same cycle. That is why bedroom dusting often fit naturally near laundry day. A woman might strip beds, gather clothing, open the room up, and then dust while the fabric load was being washed or prepared. The room could be reset as part of the same larger system. This kept the bedroom from becoming a quiet storage place for stale air and fabric dust. Did your mother or grandmother seem to have one day when bedrooms were always handled the same way? That kind of weekly rhythm made the whole house easier to manage because dust was not being chased randomly. It was being handled in patterns. And once the bedrooms were brought back into order, one final set of habits helped keep the entire house from sliding backward all over again. After all those smaller habits, one larger truth starts to come into view. Many 1950s women were not winning the fight against dust because they cleaned harder. They were winning because the house was built around order before cleaning even started. The routine had a shape to it. One task was always prepared to seamlessly start the next one. One room supported the next room. Dust was not allowed to settle wherever it pleased and then demand a rescue mission later. That is what made these homes feel different. They were not spotless every second. They were simply kept in a condition where dust had a harder time taking over. Number 16. Cleaning high before cleaning low. This is one of the oldest cleaning rules in the world, and it lasted because it made sense. Women often dusted higher surfaces first and lower surfaces last. Shelves, mantels, frames, lamps, window trim, and the tops of furniture were handled before the floor got its final sweep or vacuum. That may sound obvious, but it is one of the clearest examples of old household logic. Dust falls. If you wipe the high places after cleaning the floor, you create extra work for yourself. If you start above and work downward, each step supports the next one. The room comes together in the right order. Older women did not always explain this as a system, but they followed it like one. They understood that a home stayed manageable when work happened in a sequence that respected how dirt actually moved. Modern cleaning often feels scattered. People wipe one thing, leave the room, come back later, vacuum in the middle of everything, then notice they forgot the shelf. The task stretches out and feels endless. In older homes, the goal was not only cleanliness, it was efficiency. A woman with children, meals to prepare, laundry waiting, and errands still to do, could not afford to clean the same dust twice. That practical thinking leads directly into another place where dust loved to gather without being challenged. Number 17. Keeping closets from becoming dust traps. Closets can look harmless from the outside. The door closes, the room looks neat, and the mess stays hidden. But hidden space can become dusty space very quickly. In many homes, women work to keep closets from turning into packed little storage caves full of fabric, boxes, shoes, and forgotten layers of dust. This was easier partly because people owned less, but it was also easier because many women believed a crowded space created work. Clothes packed too tightly held dust. Shoes dragged dirt in. Shelves filled with boxes and loose papers became hard to wipe. When a closet grew too full, it stopped being useful and started becoming one more neglected pocket of the house. So closets were often kept simpler. Items were folded, hung, or grouped with more care. The floor of the closet stayed open enough to sweep or wipe. Things that no longer belonged there were moved out. This prevented that stale, closed-in feeling many people remember from overstuffed old storage spaces. It also protected the rest of the room. A dusty closet does not stay separate from the bedroom around it. Every time the door opens, fibers and dust shift back into the air. The room can never feel completely fresh when the storage space behind one door is quietly working against it. And that fresh feeling mattered enough that women even thought about what they themselves were carrying from room to room. Number 18. Using aprons and house clothes. The apron was not only a symbol of domestic life, it was also a practical cleaning tool in its own quiet way. Many women changed into house clothes or tied on an apron before doing the day's work. That helped protect better clothing, of course, but it also helped separate indoor work from the dust and dirt of the outside world. Shoes, coats, handbags, public spaces, and errands all carried dust into the home. So did the fabric of everyday wear. A woman who changed into clothing meant for housework was often doing more than dressing for comfort. She was creating a cleaner rhythm inside the home itself. The kitchen, the laundry area, and the living room were not being handled in the same clothes used for the street, the market, or town. This is one of those habits that seems small until you imagine how many times a day dirt can travel from one place to another. A house stayed cleaner when the people caring for it were also paying attention to what they brought into it. The apron helped catch flour, lint, crumbs, and dust from chores that would otherwise land on a dress or blouse, and move through the rest of the house. Today, the apron is often remembered as an old image, but in practical terms, it was part of a larger household boundary. It helped define when the work of the home began, and it kept that work from spreading more mess than necessary. Once the woman herself was ready, the room had to be made ready too. Number 19. Putting things away before dusting. This habit may be one of the most important of all because it explains why some homes always seem easier to clean than others. Many women did not try to dust around disorder. They put things away first. Magazines went back to their place. Toys were picked up, shoes were moved, folded sewing items, letters, hairbrushes, and stray cups were cleared from the room. Only then did proper cleaning begin. That mattered because dusting around clutter is not true dusting. It is avoidance. The visible spaces may look better for a moment, but the room is still holding on to all the little pockets where dust can gather out of sight. Women who understood this kept the reset and the cleaning connected. The room had to return to itself before it could be properly wiped down. This is also why older housekeeping often felt calmer. The task had a beginning. First restore order, then clean. Instead of jumping directly into wiping, women often spent a few minutes making the room make sense again. That simple step reduced frustration and made the actual cleaning much faster. Which of these old habits would make the biggest difference in your home today? That question brings everything together because all of these habits were strongest when they were repeated as part of one final weekly pattern. Number 20. Doing a Saturday reset. In many homes, there was some version of a weekly reset. For some families, it happened on Saturday. For others, it followed another day that fit work, church, school, or family schedules. But the principle stayed the same. The week needed a point where the house was brought back into order, before dust, clutter, laundry, and neglected corners could pile up too far. This was not always a grand, deep clean. Often it was a steady reset of the rooms that mattered most. Floors were handled, furniture was wiped, bedding was straightened, closets were checked, entryways were cleared. Dust cloths were shaken out and put back where they belonged. The house was prepared to begin another week without carrying too much mess forward. That is the deeper lesson in all 20 of these habits. The room was not magic. The routine was. These women did not have secret products or endless free time. Many were tired, busy, and under pressure, but they lived inside a rhythm that kept small problems from growing into overwhelming ones. Dust was only one example. The larger skill was noticing early, acting simply, and repeating the habit often enough that the home stayed within reach. If this brought back a memory of your mother, grandmother, or a home that always seemed quietly under control, subscribe and stay close. There are many more forgotten habits worth remembering. Sometimes the answer is not another product under the sink. Sometimes it is the image of a woman folding her dust cloth after a room is finished, setting it down near the kitchen sink, and leaving the house not perfect but cared for.